Well, cool. We've given folks a few minutes, Steve, to kind of get in here, and I think we've got a good discussion, on lock. So we will get started here today. So welcome everybody. If you're attending live, if you're watching the recording later on, appreciate having you, here with us today. Was able to secure Steve, I think, really high profile guest for us in the webinar series. So appreciate Steve and him lending some of his time. It's quite valuable to talk today about, I think, a pretty solid topic and one that I think, is something that I get asked a lot, but I've never actually done like a focused session or topic or anything like that on this exact thing. So title of today's talk is webinar is how to build your marketing team for success. And really the context of today's conversation is really all about what it is like to bring a marketing team in, whether it's a freelancer, whether it's a agency, whether it's actually hiring someone on your team full time. There's all these combinations, Lego blocks, if you will, maybe that makes sense. So Steve, I imagine some people listening or kind of tuning in later maybe don't know you. I can't imagine it's a lot, but if you wouldn't mind, maybe just a minute or two, your background, what you do at Better Talent and kind of your history in the space.
Sure. Started in the industry in 1997 as a vacation rental manager of one property, like most people started with one. Grew that to 400 properties over the course of 2 decades. Was in the Orlando market to start, went into Captiva Island, kind of Southwest Florida, ultimately bought a company in San Diego, and then opened up in Sun Valley, Idaho. At peak, had 100 employees. Also had a real estate company that was focused on short-term rentals, a development company called Purpose Built. So we would design, spec, and build purpose-built vacation homes. An interior design company. We would furnish those vacation rentals and then sell them through the real estate company and then ultimately manage them. So it's kind of a vertically integrated group of companies. And then also built a proprietary PMS platform to run that business. Started building that, about 1999, 2000. That grew as a company into a company, I should say, and that ultimately became LiveRes, which many will know of today. It's owned by Inhabit IQ. I'm the former shareholder and chief strategy officer, kind of as a part-time job. And then I've been involved in a lot of the different trade associations in the industry, going back to the Central Florida Property Managers Association, the Favor now. I was vice president of it, and then vice president and president of VRMA going back about a decade ago. I'm currently on the ambassador committee for VRMA and the co-chair of the growth board for VR Nation. So still very involved in trade associations. Launched Better Talent 5 years ago, almost to the day, April 2020, right about the time when nobody was getting hired, everybody was getting laid off because of the pandemic, which was kind of scary at the beginning, but it actually was pretty good timing for once out of 16 companies that I've started. And it was because everybody got rehired, right? And so it allowed us to use our unique methodology to help people put people in the right seats as they were building their team back up. And so that was a good time to launch. Today, we work with close to 400 companies, mostly in the vacation rental industry, mostly operators, vacation rental management companies, short-term rental operators, but we also work with a lot of the suppliers in the tech community, as well as service providers. So
Yeah.
that's us.
So typically, Steve, you have a very short to-do list, not much on it, not really much going on most days for you, I imagine, just very relaxing at the beach and such.
Just hanging out by the pool.
Yeah, just of course. But no, it's impressive, Steve. And like I said, I know your time is super valuable, so I appreciate you hopping on. And hopefully people listening will understand that like you've seen it all, or I don't know if you've seen everything, maybe, but you've seen enough to kind of share some different insights that we can learn from. So
Right when you think you've seen it all, you find out differently. So
yeah, that's true. Yeah, I like to say with clients sometimes I say I've seen a lot. I never say I've seen it all, but I've seen a lot maybe with respect to marketing tactics or techniques or channels. So maybe that's the phrasing we can use. You've seen a lot, and that's a good thing because it gives you a lot of context and experience, obviously. So yeah, I know some people came in obviously from Steve's list and Steve's promotion that he did over the Better Talent side. So if we haven't met yet, hello, my name is Conrad O'Connell. I'm the founder of BuildUp Bookings. We're a digital marketing agency that started in 2016. You mentioned like that to the day thing actually a moment ago, Steve. That makes me think that we're coming up on that anniversary, if you will. For me, July 1 is that anniversary of me leaving the agency that I was involved with before and then starting out on my own. So it'll be 9 years here in about 3 weeks or so, at least at the time of this recording, which is crazy to think about because it doesn't feel like it's been that long. But I guess I realized when I started BuildUp, my son was like this little tiny 5, 6 pound newborn baby. And now he's, in third grade about to leave that and go off to the next thing. So I guess it does make sense, but it doesn't feel that way from time to time. Anywho, a year and a half ago, I wrote a book called Mastering Vacational Marketing, which puts all the marketing techniques, tactics, strategies that we've learned working with 200 plus global clients over the past 9 years into a bite-sized package that you can go and check out. We got some more stuff on the end about the book. If you want a copy, stick around. I'll have the opportunity for you to check that out. And yeah, we focus on search, social, and email marketing for our vacation rental clients. And just over the last 12 months, we can show $50 million of direct bookings that have been driven from our campaigns and the lovely clients we've been able to work for. We don't deserve all the credit, but again, we've seen a few things, so we kind of know what has worked well and things that we can continue to improve and build off of as we get going. So kind of six focus areas today for today's discussion, and it's going to be a little bit more of a conversation. But we got some reference points on the screen that people, attending to check out and look at, so they understand kind of what's going on here. When to hire and who to hire. Understanding the costs of hiring. There's definitely costs in hiring, whether it's internal costs or actual payments that you're making out to a recruiting firm or a talent agency. Obviously, like better talent. Margins. Talking about margins, Steve has a lot of when we were putting our slides together here for this presentation. Steve had a lot of thoughts about margins and understanding costs of marketing and how important it is, but also you got to pay for it. So we're going to talk about the margin side of it a little bit. Pros and cons of each hiring decision. So again, who you hire matters obviously, and then what are the benefits of working with an agency? What are the drawbacks of working with an agency? And I'm an agency owner, so I can try to be as honest as I can about kind of the way it does work and the way it doesn't work. Same thing with a full-time person versus a contractor, that sort of thing. What is your pathway? What is your people stack? Steve referenced in our slides here, and how do you build marketing people stack? How do you build other things as we get going? So, is that a fair summary? Hopefully, Steve, a little agenda to keep us on track here.
That is perfect.
Dig
Excellent.
it. All right, awesome. So I'll get us kind of started here with I think scaling marketing is hard. Like this is hard stuff to do. I think the main reason that I feel this way, having now done this or seen this happen, at hundreds of different companies, vacational companies over the past almost 10 years, is that there's not always like a playbook that you could just copy and run and that always works that way. Like I think on the operation side, I imagine people who are more focused on that side, they kind of know their inputs and their outputs a little bit more clearly. It's kind of like step A, go in here, train this housekeeper, get this person trained up, and then they're in good shape. And maybe they don't need to feel like there's a lot of creativity involved in that. We train someone up, we get them in good shape, we're on to the next thing. Marketing can be challenging because we could try something on the marketing side, something creative that we think might work, and it might fall flat on our face or it might work really well. We don't know. So I think scaling marketing is hard because sometimes what you're doing stops working. That's a common thing. I was on an email thread with a client this morning who may even be attending with us here today, and they were saying that, hey, our Facebook ad click-through rate is down, a little bit month over month, and it's kind of going in the wrong direction. And it's the ads that we had that were once working are unfortunately no longer working. The audience has a little bit of ad fatigue. They've seen the same ad over and over again. So now we got to go in and refresh all the ads, which is obviously something that we're happy to do for the client, but it does make it challenging, right? When we have something that's working, it's kind of almost like a spinning plate type thing. It's not going to work that way forever in many situations. Even though we've got kind of our stalwarts, like again, we talk about search, which has a paid and organic component, social, which has a paid and organic component, and email marketing. Those three things are still ultimately, there's a lot of variations and changes that need to happen, within those different, disciplines or within those different channels to see success. So scaling marketing is hard. I don't want to sit here and do this presentation for the next few minutes and make you think it's easy. And Steve, I don't know if you have any, feedback when you were doing your companies. It sounds like you have a bit of that marketing mind. What did you kind of find as you like found these little friction points as you were building some of those?
Yeah, back then we were not reliant like most are on the OTAs. So marketing, you had to do it. You had no choice. There wasn't as many eyeballs looking at the channels as there are today. And so early on in my company, we knew we had to have somebody in marketing, ultimately built a full digital ad agency in-house. And we had every component of what you just described in-house, which was mind-numbingly difficult to build out. It was a massive investment in people, but also in professional development of those people. So we were constantly going to SEO conferences, SEO Moz and PubCon and all the different places that Conrad, I know you've probably been to. We actually spent the money to send them out there and train them on it. And when I look back at it, it definitely, there was an ROI, but was it a better ROI than if we had outsourced some of those components? And we tried outsourcing. There weren't as many companies as there are today in our space that really understand what they're doing and know how to market vacation rentals. There just wasn't professional businesses like yours in those days. So again, it kind of forced us to have to do what we did because we were 100% direct. We had to do marketing, and there wasn't strong marketing partners to outsource to. So went through that, and I still to this day know more about SEO and organic SEO, at least I'm pretty outdated, I'm sure, than I want to, right? So because of that time investment and put into it. So
Yeah, the SEO note, I guess I would say there is that it's funny. There's all these, trendy tactics and new things come in and out. And I believe it kind of comes back to these four areas, right? Technical, what keyword are we going after? Is the content in good shape? And are we building links? Like those, that worked when I started first heard the word SEO, excuse me, or that terminology in 2012, and that still works well today. So I think it's one of those things where it's like people tend to overcomplicate or we jump on that new trend, if you will, right? But the truth is that, it's a struggle there. But Steve, we talked about this in the intro, and I know we have a block on it later on where we'll talk about this in more detail detail talking about margins, but you kind of shared this with me in our planning call here. 80% of property managers, in your opinion, have too thin margins. Can you define this a little bit better for me? What does too thin margins mean? How do we know if we actually have the budget to invest in any kind of marketing solution?
Yeah, in today, sometimes you see companies where their total take rate, if you will, their commission and any margins on fees is, 15%. That's really, really challenging to take a good portion of that and put it into direct marketing and be successful. And so, understanding exactly what your total effective commission rate is before you kind of put together a marketing budget is imperative. And we had at the time, and for the 20 years that I had the company, and I work with a lot of companies that have similar rates where they're more like 35, 38, 36 total commission. In those cases, you can take a significant portion of that, put it towards marketing and be successful. So it really comes down to, do I have the margins to be able to put together a marketing budget? And what does that look like? What percentage of that marketing or that margin should I put towards direct marketing? And it's a challenging thing to figure out today, I would say,
Mm.
simply because unlike, my days, the OTAs are really powerful, really strong. They're expensive, far more expensive than they were in our days. So you have to consider that relative to the investment in marketing. And, if you're 100% reliant on OTAs, being able to then, start marketing and getting direct bookings is challenging to kind of navigate and understand inside of the construct of your financials. And so if you don't have a strong understanding of your financial and have good, strong financial controls in place, that's where you need to start before you go invest a bunch of money in marketing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Steve, that's one thing where just like as I've gotten older, hopefully I've gotten a little wiser. And I would say that's the version of me understands this a lot better than the version of me that started the company in 2016, where I'm
Right.
just like, look, I know how to do marketing. Look, I'm good at it. Like, let me show you the techniques and tactics I'm going to use. And I didn't realize that like if the foundation of the building is cracked, like to your point, the margins aren't there, the cost isn't there. Me pitching them, doing SEO or running Google ads or running Facebook ads, I'm just shouting up the wrong tree. Like that is like we need to fix the foundation first before we can build off of it, right?
And if you don't do that, you won't have that customer very long and they won't be happy with you, right? So
Yeah.
it's that you do that first. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm probably
This
the only recruiter on earth that asks if someone is doing trust accounting at the first conversation.
I feel like that has to be the case. I like to say a lot of hard to disprove things on my side too. Steve, one thing I say just out of jest, but I believe it to be true. No one's looked at more vacation rental search result pages on Google than me, which I can't prove or disprove. No one can prove or
Right,
disprove, but I'm
right.
like, I've done
Yeah.
this
Sounds
8 times
good.
a day for 10 years, so it's
Yeah,
like, yeah, test me. Like, tell me
yeah,
what's so
exactly.
anyways, as we were kind of talking about, like you've got to be smart, right? Like this is challenging, like, make no mistake. So we got to be smart when to hire and who to hire. And I think this is kind of our first talking point because there's kind of these three options. So this is what I want to go through for a few minutes here, right? There's freelancer, or we could use the word contractor. I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that terminology, Steve, maybe you have a different way that you think about it. There's an agency or some kind of like more, let's say, packaged together service that you might be able to hire. And then there's in-house. So I kind of see these three different, pillars as we go through it. So obviously I sit in the middle seat, if you will. I'm going to be very biased, or I try to remove my bias as much as possible towards, hey, this is a good idea. But it only is a good idea in some situations, some, types of setup. So, your thought process on this, Steve, as you look at these three tiles on the screen, freelancer, agency, in-house, maybe high level, what are some, maybe explain this a little bit and then we'll talk about who it might be a fit for depending on the business.
Yeah, I think early stage companies, it's really hard to have somebody in-house that's not you. And what I mean by that, if you're the founder and you're really strong in marketing, then you're probably maybe doing that as part of what you do early stage. And so it's hard to hire. It's only when you get to a certain scale and have enough margin to be able to afford in-house that it makes sense. So it's either a freelancer, an agency, or yourself being that in-house person when the company is smaller, it's getting started, it's, less than 50, 100 properties, that type of thing. So, which by the way is 80% of our industry has less than 20, right? And so,
Yeah.
depending on where you stand and what kind of margins you have, that's really what's going to dictate that. And even if you are a high margin and a more scaled organization, I know today, I will tell you, I would not have a full ad agency in-house like I did back then today. I would use either freelancers or an agency for components of my marketing. I more than likely would have a marketing person on my team. The one thing I think that everybody should have, whether that's you in a startup scenario or ultimately as you bring people in-house, is somebody who can actually be the content producer in the market. meaning someone that goes out to the houses and does videos. If you're at a beach, does beach videos, that type of thing. That's really hard for agencies and freelancers to do unless the freelancer happens to be in the market. And it certainly should be connected to your brand in a way. So that's something that we certainly advocate for. But I think that's, you know, what do you use? It's probably a combination of these things. And that's probably what I would use even with a scaled organization today.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a really good example of this. And I always say this with clients, right? There's things that we can do well from afar, and there's things that we literally can't do well from afar. So a home tour, is exactly, you nailed it. And it's not that hard. I think some people get intimidated by that. It hasn't been that hard for us to upskill people, in some situations locally to get those skills. Like we'll give someone a gimbal, a newer iPhone, and like we've already got like a 7 out of 10 video footage just from that. And then if we give them a little bit of coaching or guidance or feedback on like, hey, go slow during the interesting parts of the home, the view, the backyard, the fire
Mhm.
pit. Maybe the kitchen is really nice in some listings. Go slow there, and then go faster in the boring parts. The hall between the master bedroom and the whatever the living room. Maybe it's not that interesting. You can run through that part. That's fine. And then it may only take 7, 8, 10 videos, and then boom, now we're getting much better quality video. Then we can edit that from afar, right? So like we don't need that person necessarily be shooting the video, editing it, an expert in music production, and how to cut a video. Those are all different things that can be done. But if someone could come in and shoot a handful of properties every single week, for us. We actually had a client who trained their inspection kind of specialist to do this kind of thing. So they'd inspect the property, they'd give it a thumbs up, it was good. They had 10 minutes and they say, all right, I know it's good. I just went through it. I did an inspection. It's in good shape. They did a walkthrough, dumped that file into a Google Drive, sent it off to our team. We can then cut those, edit those, and turn those into social posts or ads. So I think that's a good thing, for sure, Steve, which is, admit this wasn't in our outline. Maybe it's worth asking you about this idea that marketing is kind of almost inherent to a lot of people on the team. Like most inspection people wouldn't think like, okay, marketing is my job. My job is to inspect clean to make sure it went well. But if I ask them for 10 minutes at a time, even once or twice a day, if they're doing inspections, like that's not going to break them. Hopefully, there's enough bandwidth in their day to do that. But it helps us out a ton because now we have new videos coming fresh. So what's kind of your perspective on that? Like, should the operations person be thinking about marketing? Should the inspection, should the reservations team, like what's kind of your logic on those involvements from marketing in
Yeah,
other
I think
areas?
I think I would encourage it, but only encourage it during kind of shoulder and off season. In the high
Mhm.
season, I wouldn't even ask them to do any of that thing, right? They're going to be head down focused on that. One thing I did want to mention, we were talking about video and kind of content production, but another thing that an agency, other than kind of the photography agencies, can't do is actual still photography, which is probably the single most important thing from a marketing perspective. But I think you would probably agree if we don't have good
Absolutely.
quality pictures, nothing else we do from a marketing perspective matters as much, right? And so whether that is an agency that focuses on photography, which there are some that send photographers out, across the country, or somebody in-house that is doing that exceptionally well, or a local photographer. I will tell you, after years and years of working through that, it was very difficult to find a local photographer that was really good at interior photography in a way that is because a lot of interior photographers will take a section of a room or a portion or that's like lifestyle shots. You need the whole room, right? And you need to give for that listing, right? And so having somebody that's really good at that, really good at lighting, really good at post production, all of those things is imperative, whether that's an agency thing or in house. So
Yeah.
uh, photographers are important. Is what it comes down
Yeah,
to.
couldn't agree more. Again, I feel like back to that shaky foundation comment, right? Like if you got very mediocre photography, all the ads we're going to run, everything we're going to do to that listing, once we get someone to that listing, if they don't see something that's visually very impressive, especially if we're trying to market a premium stay, a premium, property, those things have to be congruent is kind of the way that I think about it from a marketing perspective, right? The congruence between I'm charging $1,000 a night, it needs to be visually impressive when I get there and I get excited about spending $1,000 a night at a, really high-end vacation rental home, right? So I think that that's so important. What I see happening a lot, Steve, in marketing, just in general, especially if the founder or the owner of the company is not very marketing focused, is it's kind of like check the box. Like, okay, I took photos, like check the box, like I took photos, or I wrote a listing description. Okay, check the box, it's done, it's all set. But in my mind, there's always a vast of difference between like having done something and having done something with best practices in mind, right? So like same thing happens in the SEO world, not to get all nerdy SEO wise. I can't imagine people attending care that much, but what I see regularly is like I checked it and there's a title tag present on the homepage. Well, again, that's very different that there's a title tag there versus there's a good title tag there that actually targets a keyword that people are searching for, and we've optimized around that keyword. So if we just have this idea of like checkbox marketing, hey, we wrote a description, we did photos, we did a video, we have a title tag on the homepage, et cetera, et cetera. It can lead us down this, I think at times flaw of just like, is it actually good though? Is it actually working well? I have a client, we've talked this on different, shows and webinar stuff that we've done in the past. I have a client that sends two photographers to every new listing they do, completely separate times, different everything. And they go, what I always end up doing is I end up using, let's say 10 or 15 shots from photographer number one, and I end up using 20 or 25 shots from photographer number two. And it ends up with a much better gallery when it's all said and done, but they had to go through that process of doing two different ones there. So more
Interesting.
expensive. This is a luxury property manager. Not everybody maybe can have that in their budget, but it's just like, yeah, like why not, right? To your point, this is some of the most valuable assets we get. Why not have people that see it from a different angle and different, eye? It could be positives there. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this will be a theme that we repeat a little bit as we keep going here. Again, you may hire one or all these things, as you get going, and depending on the size of your company and what you're looking for, and the more kind of I would say logical pieces that you have in place, the better the results are going to be. So cost, Steve, I think this is probably where you have a lot more knowledge on, because you're putting these listings out for folks and you're helping people secure this talent. And we kind of joked when we were putting these slides together about this idea that maybe some people come to you and they want this unicorn marketer who's going to make 60K a year, and they're going to do everything. They're going to do email and social and Facebook ads and stuff like that. Are you finding these people? Because if so, Steve, I think I need to hire you to find more of these people on my team. But what's the reality of this?
Yeah, we are not, and they don't actually exist. And what I mean by that is somebody that can do everything that you just described. And what's interesting about marketing today is there's different types of personalities that work really well for different components of marketing, right? And so the unicorn that can do it all well doesn't exist, because the person who's really good at being super creative and coming up with new ideas from a marketing perspective and producing content is unlikely to be very good at the analytics of marketing, which is such an important component of marketing. So can you get somebody to do one piece of that or multiple pieces? Sure. Can you get somebody that does it all very well, and especially for 60K a year today? No, you cannot. It doesn't exist. And we do get asked on a regular, like, I'm ready to hire a marketing person. Well, what do you want them to do? I want them to do everything. And, that
Long list.
just, yeah, exactly. And so we have to come, go through the process of talking through what that looks like. And I always ask them, I kind of divide it into the two. Do you want somebody that's really strong in content production or distribution and analytics? Because those are the two, if there's a divider, that's from a personality trait perspective. And as you know, Conrad, and anybody listening, part of our process is we profile every individual that comes through as a potential applicant. And there are certain personalities that work with one or the other. And it's much more multifaceted than that, because there are really strong, to be really strong at organic SEO, you may not be great at cost per click management and managing paid ads, like that type of thing. So it really gets granular, and to have somebody that can do it all is unlikely. Can you have a marketing coordinator that understands all of those different components and knows enough about it to make sure that the supplier, the contractor, the third party, agency that's doing it is doing it well? Yes, I believe you can get somebody like that. And, I went to SEO conferences not so that I could do SEO, so I could understand if I outsourced it or I hired somebody to do it, that I knew they were doing it well. I kind of use the analogy when I go to take my car to an auto mechanic. I don't want to know how to change the oil or the transmission or whatever's got to be fixed, but I want to know enough about that to not get ripped off. And that's the same thing with this. It's not about getting ripped off. It's just making sure they're effective, right? And so knowing what to look at and knowing what ROI looks like and that type of thing. Owners, operators, general managers, CEOs, COOs aren't necessarily going to have that much marketing prowess to really understand that. So maybe you have somebody on the team that is that kind of central figure that understands all the different aspects of it, is not the person to produce it all. And maybe they're good in, that localized content production we were talking about earlier, understand enough about the analytics to be able to kind of look at it. And that's your marketer, right? If you have one person on a team, for example.
Yeah. I think the story I told Steve when we were putting this together was this idea that I had a client call a little while ago, potential client call, and he said something to the effect of, well, I want to make sure you're working on the account, when it comes to content or comes to email or something like that. And I go, I mean this genuinely. It's not like a bid. I'm not doing this so you'll sign the contract. I will do worse than my team on some of these things. Like when I give, the email marketing project that we're about to do with this particular, client or potential client over to Dawn on my team, who's now been doing this for 6, 7 years at this point, and all she does is email marketing for vacation rental managers. Like she's going to do a better job than I am. If I were to go do that email, I would do it worse. Like I'm giving you to someone who's actually more skilled on my team and does this all day. Now again, same thing, right, Steve? I don't want to say that I'm just the figurehead of not doing anything, but just this idea that like I'm looking at what they're doing, I can review the numbers, etc. But she has so many examples. She's made literally hundreds of newsletters for different clients that we work with over the last time frame, and she knows what's going to work well. And kind of my pitch, if you will, or just the benefit of the agency model, whether you hire me or any other agency, is that you don't need 40 hours of someone like Dawn on my team or someone like Matt on my team a week for most vacational companies. And if you do, yes, in-house may make a lot of sense, obviously. What you need probably is 5 hours a week of one specific thing done for you, like 5 hours of video editing when we do get those property video shot in the off season. Great, I'll take my video editor who I fractionalize his or her time across a dozen projects and say, well, you need 5 hours of someone that really knows what they're doing for this. Let me give you that 5 hours. I'm selling it at an increased price from what I'm paying them, but you're getting a lot of value out of that when we put it as part of a comprehensive strategy. So again, whether you work with BuildUp or not, or you hire any other agency, that's ultimately what we're offering. So when you're working with, I think, an agency, that should be your question is like, why is this person's 5 hours of time going to do a lot better than if I try to do it myself or DIY or hire a contractor or whatever the case may be? So that's kind of been my experience with it. And I think you're spot on. Some of our most successful relationships, I feel, are people that have this type of coordinator. I don't know exactly what their salary is, but someone who's kind of in the company, they know everything going on, they know all the little weak spots in the calendar, they know where the occupancy is weak as they're looking at the numbers, the data with their team internally, and they go, you know what, we really need to push XYZ holiday. July 4th is still slow right now. Let's go ahead and put together some advertising for that. And then it's my job and my team's job to say, okay, great, we're going to do an email campaign, we're going to get that out, we'll do the design, the copywriting, we'll send you proof and we'll get it out there. We'll do a Facebook ads campaign, Meta ads campaign. We'll have some specific creative talking about 4th of July. We've got special deals, discounts, offers. We'll need our web dev team to put a landing page together. So it ends up needing maybe 8 or 10 people to get a campaign like that out. But we wouldn't have been able to do that really effectively, maybe without that in-house person flagging it for us and saying like, hey, we're soft on 4th of July, give us a little boost. We can assist in that way. So that's kind of how I see it working in practicality. I'm not sure if that's kind of what you envisioned as well or what you're describing there, but
100% aligned with what I'm saying. And we see the marketing coordinators, marketing director, whatever title, and what's the salary range? It ranges greatly depending on
yeah.
how much experience that person has in the space, how robust they're, and how much of it they're going to do versus the outsourced agency. But I think for a scaled vacation rental company north of 100 properties, for example, although property count matters less than margin, as we were talking about before, but if you have the ability to hire that first marketing person, I think they should be not necessarily a unicorn marketer like the person on the screen, but that person that has at least a baseline, a strong baseline understanding of all the different components of marketing so they can work with a third party to do what needs to be done that they can't do. So
Mhm. Well, maybe Steve, just a little bit on cost for a second, or hiring on that side of it, just if we have a moment. So let's say we're hiring more of that coordinator type level. Maybe it's more like a 70 to 80K range, or maybe it's something where someone comes in with some scale. But we were talking also about different locations, different places that people can hire from. So for example, we have some people now on our team from South America, from Central America. We have people, of course, the Philippines has been a popular hiring place for, I feel like, a few years now for some clients that we work with for things like customer service roles, stuff like that. So maybe walk through that at a high level. Again, if you're hiring someone in the Philippines versus South America versus in the States. Yeah, just any thoughts on that or numbers that you see with your recruiting?
the least expensive, or one of the least expensive places, certainly the Philippines. And it's just like here though, and people think they use the term VA and they almost think of someone from the Philippines or South America as they're all the same. No, it's exactly like hiring somebody here in the US. Their personality traits matter, their cognitive matters, their skills matter, their background, that what they know, all that matters. And what you pay them matters too. The good thing is the cost structure is so low in places like the Philippines or Colombia. Colombia is a little higher than the Philippines. But you can pay incrementally better than the market without a big expense and get high quality individuals. An example, I have a team in the Philippines on my team, some of which have 15 and 20 years of HR experience. I don't even have that much experience in HR. I don't come from it, right? And so I can hire somebody for, say, $9 or $10 an hour on a direct hire basis that has amazing qualifications and experience in that particular part of the business, and it's very low cost. Now, the downside of it is they're on the other side of the clock, meaning if you want them to work at the same time you are, they're working in the middle of the night. So there's a little bit of language barriers sometimes. Most of them speak English really well. But from a marketing perspective, you can find good marketers, but you definitely have to lead and manage them just like you would a team member here. And they are not all the same. And a lot of people will have hired a VA and said, yeah, it didn't really work out for me. But that's like saying, having a bad hire here in the US and just saying, well, I'm never going to hire any employees anymore because that didn't work out. Everyone is a unique human. You need to think of them as such, not as a robot. And kind of go through the typical hiring process or whatever your hiring process is that you would for a US based person with that person, really quantifying and making sure they have the skill set that they say they have in that regard as well. So I think you can get really good talent that way. I don't know that I would say though that marketing coordinator that helps produce the localized content, that type of thing is really would be from overseas, whether it's Colombia or Philippines or otherwise. I will say we've had more success in South America with marketers specifically than we have in the Philippines. Philippines for like guest services and a lot of the other different attributes, absolutely all day. But there's some really strong marketers in South America.
Yeah, we've noticed the same, and our team is kind of expanding and growing, and we're always looking for where those efficiencies, as far as finding the right people. And same as you're saying, we found someone who joined our team recently, who worked on email marketing campaigns for some of the biggest companies in the country that she's from in South America. So she was basically working with like a top agency there, was doing a lot of email marketing work for them. We brought her on. She's been absolutely fantastic, and she's doing a great job and actually brought some new ideas, things that we weren't doing. And, it was actually interesting to hear a perspective from someone who was in a little bit of a different world, more of an e-commerce world, and then taking some of those ideas and applying them to, vacation rentals, which kind of is e-commerce in a way when we think about it, not a cart and purchasing a product in terms of that's going to be shipped to your house, but certainly in terms of purchasing activity, getting someone to come in and buy something, it's the same idea. So yeah, I think that understanding the cost structure, like you said, you could certainly find people. If you want to find someone inexpensively, right? There's Fiverr, there's Upwork. You can go and find people inexpensively. To your point, though, Steve, it's really about finding A, the right people, and B, people that are going to actually move your business forward. Nothing will, I think, sink you faster than going cheap on the hiring. We can find people for a few bucks an hour, but are they actually going to hit your goals? Is that actually what you're after? Is the goal to spend the least amount of money on the hire, or is the goal to grow the business and make it better and find new opportunities and stuff like that? I'm sure most people are looking to grow the business, not just figure out a way to shave a few bucks off a salary or whatever the case may be.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
awesome. So we touched on it earlier. Maybe we can do a little bit of a deeper dive into, kind of margins. What are some activities in your mind that improve margins? So we kind of touched on at the top where it's like if you're getting that, 4 or 5% of collected, once you pay all your bills, a little bit's left for you over. How do you ever do marketing? But like, what are
Yeah.
some things that you've seen when you look at companies or that you review of companies that actually maybe go from that 15% range to that 30% range? What are all the changes they have to make to improve their margins so they can do more marketing?
Well, so many are not charging, different types of guest fees. They might not be doing a damage waiver where they're making margin. They might not be selling travel insurance. So there's all of the different fees and different ways that you can increase margin. One of the ways from a marketing perspective that I always encourage is in your rental agreement, ask for a certain amount of use days of the property on a given year. And when I first did this, I used it as a marketing tool where we would have a stay 7, pay 6 special. They'd get a free night on a 7-night stay. I'd get that night from the owner. So I'd get 7 nights from that owner on an annualized basis. I'd use one night for each one of those specials. So the only thing I was missing when I discounted that one night was my margin on that night, right? And so instead of giving a discount where you're taking a significant part of the hit, you're getting that from the homeowner. What I ended up landing on though was asking those owners for those nights usage for anything. And what I mean by that is we were able to actually take the revenue from those nights. We wouldn't take it during like peak season periods, but we would kind of grab them in the shoulder and we allocated 100% of that revenue. So we would to take the free night, we would charge the client the normal rate. We would put all of that money into the marketing budget. And so when we had 400 properties and 7, days of occupancy each year for 400 properties, we had a significant marketing budget all of a sudden that we didn't have prior. And we were just using for specials and whatnot. And we allocate it. Now, the key is, some companies will do that and we'll just throw that to the bottom line and call it profit. But if you want to keep your owners happy, you definitely want to reallocate those funds towards marketing efforts to get higher rates, to get more occupancy and drive more for the business. And that's what we did. And so
Yeah.
I advocate for companies to do that all the time.
I've never heard that one. So I like that I'm learning here too, Steve, because if I do some quick math, 400 properties, 7 nights, 1 week basically free from each one, 2,800 nights per year to play with. Now, obviously, this is going to depend on your average booking value, but let's say, I mean, you were managing premium homes,
It was
350 a night.
400. It was
Yeah.
400 ADR. Yeah.
Yeah, 400 ADR, that's 1.1 million. If my math is right here, 1.12 million in kind of extra just play money. Maybe you could figure out how to build off of. I thought you were actually going to go a different route there. I thought you were going to say we could do influencer stays, we could do giveaways. A lot of our clients do things like giveaways. We run some for clients as well. Was that ever something you dived into on that realm
I
or?
do. I just tend to go to the one that's going to produce the most amount of marketing budget out of the gates and
Yeah.
then go from there. And then it goes on down the line, right? So there's all the different fee structures and margins from that. If you're not optimizing for that, you should be for the business as a whole, then allocate some of that towards marketing. But influencer stays was a big piece for us. And, not all influencers are created equal. So you got to be super
Mhm.
careful on who you allocate that to. So we would use marketing nights for that, put them up, PR. I used to say PR is SEO. If you could
Mhm.
get, listed on a high traffic website, blog, or whatever, in the backlink, as you said early on, that still works. That was a really good way to do that through PR efforts. And, PR today is really those influencers as opposed to traditional media.
Yeah. Yeah, I think we've had some examples of clients kind of going the more traditional pre-hour route and getting coverage in like media publications that you might have heard of. We had a client last year who got covered in like travel and leisure extensively. They were launching a new property and people covered it. It definitely brought a lot of traffic. It brought some awareness. And I think it is like a legitimacy builder, excuse me, right? Where people are like, oh, this property is brand new. It's featured in a magazine or a travel publication I've heard of before. I think it does help create some, credibility that that's a new thing that you should be trying out. Did it drive a lot of bookings? Not necessarily, but I think it's kind of just one of those bricks, in your foundation, right, that you're kind of building off of on the marketing side. So big fan of it, but something that I think, yeah, it's always a battle actually when we do the contests or giveaways, Steve, where the client has to go back to the owner and say, hey, we want to do a giveaway. Would you be willing to participate? It's always a little bit of a, well, what do I get out of it? We talk about the promotion of the listing. We talk about the eyeballs that property is going to get. We'll do email marketing to the people that don't win. We'll send them a message, that sort of thing. But it's always like more work than it should be, honestly, versus just like, I like your idea a lot because we could just be like, cool, we're doing 4 giveaways a year or something like that. And it can get us a lot more email addresses, get us a lot of attention. It's going to make our marketing work better. And we don't have to go do a lot of cross-checking with them. We could just kind of pick 4 of the best homes, use our marketing days on those, and then, we're cooking with gas in that respect. So I like that a lot.
It works, and a lot of people when they first do it, they, might crawl before they walk, then they run,
Sure.
and might do a few days, 3 days, 4 days. And some of our high-end properties later in the game, we had 10 in a year. And yeah, when you're in the sales process to sign that owner, they definitely question it. But when you can say, look, you're benefiting from the aggregate of the whole doing this, all of these people, we have $1.1 million to put towards marketing, and they see that marketing, meaning they can tell a lot of them owners come to you because of your retail marketing. And that's another reason to frankly do marketing that's not OTA. If you show up in the search results and you show up on social channels, and you have a big following, owners are going to want to come to your company, right? So, and that's how we grew a lot of our inventory was our marketing, and yet the owners help provide that. So it's just a
Yeah.
really great way to go.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I mean, I've said that over and over again, right? Which is this idea that like you can't fire out a postcard and say that you're the best because owners are smart enough to cross-check that. And say, well, if you're the
Exactly.
best, why do you have 7 homes, right, in this market, and then the competition has 500 homes like that? Yeah, that doesn't. Again, the congruency isn't there, obviously, on that side of it. So when you actually build these in your business and you just build a healthier margin, to your point, I mean, most people I talk to it's almost like a sad situation when they don't have enough margin because it's like they want to do it, they're like willing to do it, but they're like, I literally can't. Like, I'll go in the red. Like, there's not. These are small businesses, right? We don't have the VC world for the most part in these typical management companies, small businesses. Of course, they've infiltrated the software world and the big Vicasas, and we're going to kind of put that to the side for the time being. But your typical average, small, everyday property manager doesn't have the ability to go red for maybe more than a month or two before they just straight up run out of money. So we have to build a margin, or we can't breathe, right? It's like oxygen. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, love that. Okay. Well, cool. So maybe let's talk about kind of some of the pros and cons, Steve, on these different concepts, right? So this agency, freelancer, contract kind of idea. Why would someone be, a good fit for you in each of these ones? So maybe I can speak to the agency side of it, why someone should hire us or should not hire us. I think, going back to the cost and the margin, that sort of thing, it takes me roughly the same amount of time to do an email for, let's say, a list of 200 or a list of 200,000. Like it's not necessarily more or less time if you have a much smaller list versus a much larger list. But obviously, the smaller you are, the less benefit you get out of our services. So when we're looking to qualify someone for our company, typically we're looking for people, if it's a property manager, they really need to be in that like $1 to $2 million floor and they should be wanting to grow. That shouldn't just be like where they want to be forever in terms of gross booking revenue. Because think about it, right? To your point from earlier, even if they're doing $1 million in gross booking revenue, they might only really have four or $500,000 of commissions, maybe a little bit of fees, stuff like that on top of it. They're then going to have rent and employees and things on top of that. It doesn't leave a ton of room for marketing. I think it's a place where you can start to maybe hire an agency, even if it's only for one or two specialized services, and start to get some benefit out of that. But it's tricky. If you're a property manager and you're, just getting started, you only have a handful of homes, we're probably not the right fit for you. We tell people that regularly. We disqualify people regularly and say, hey, we just, even if you want to buy this, we just don't really think it's a good fit for you right now in terms of cost, that sort of thing. Maybe that is more of a contractor where it's just like, I just need someone to hire someone temporarily. I need a logo design, let's say. You might not want to hire an agency for logo design when you're getting started. You might just want to go on Upwork and find someone that does logo design. They have a good portfolio. They do a good job for you. You pay them one time. You're not committed to a recurring fee like our services typically are. So there's kind of times and places I think where we're not the right fit. On the flip side, though, it's kind of like, and I have clients that have done this before. Man, we now have hired 7 contractors who are all doing different marketing things. Or, in our company, we got a copywriter and they do the listing site descriptions, and we have, the social media person doing this, we have PPC person doing this. None of them talk to each other, and everything's a mess. For us to actually get something out is like, pain and misery to get things out there. And it's like, oh, well, we have like one team, like you'll be working with one person, our client success team, to go and deal with all the, individual, service providers and specialists on our team. That can be like, oh, great, my headaches are going away. Like I can feel it work better there. So I do think it kind of happens at the big size, and then at the smaller size, maybe the return on, ad spend isn't there. But what's kind of your perspective, I guess, maybe on agency, if you have comments on that, and then also on freelancer contract, like when someone should, when someone shouldn't, on their in their business.
The positives of agency is certainly breadth of scope, right? So being able to have all of the different attributes of a, full service marketing company without having to pay the full dime as it pertains to all the people you would need to build one like I did, right? So I had 6 people, full-time people on my marketing team when we got to scale, and that was super expensive. I could have gotten that through an agency for a fraction of the cost. The downside, I think, is, the agency works with a lot of different clients, right? And so they get to see a lot, and kind of me as a hiring, when we're doing hiring, we hire for a lot of companies. Maybe we're better than somebody that does it in-house in one company, so we know a lot, but at the same time we have all of those mouths to feed, so to speak, as does an agency. And so just making sure that that particular agency can handle that, do it well, across a large swath of companies, because the positives can go away if they're not executing well. So, I'm pro agency, but got to have the right one with the right people that are making sure they're, doing the right thing for their clients. On the contractor side, I think what you were talking about, if I were not to use an agency, I would have a marketing coordinator and then contractors for those things that marketing coordinator is not good at, right? Maybe it's SEO, maybe it's PPC management, maybe it's content production, any of those different things, where I'm going to backfill what that person's not good at. And I might do that with the agency as well, if the agency does, kind of fragmented components of it, outsource it. But I don't think that for the most part, unless you're a really scaled organization, you should do what I did, which is hire a whole team of people to do all the things. I think you definitely are going to be outsourcing some components of this today, and that's coming from somebody who gets paid to hire people. So I wouldn't do it. We talk people out of hiring people literally every day, because if it's not going to make sense for your business, we don't want you to spend that money on that. You're going to pay us very little relative to what you're going to pay that person, and that's going to put a lot of weight on you. And so we very much want to align with the P&L, if you will, as it pertains to where you invest the money from a marketing perspective. And so contractor, freelancer, or agency, you're probably going to use one, if not all, over the course of time, even if you do have some in-house team members from a marketing perspective.
Mhm. I can really count on one hand, I would say, honestly, Steve, doing this now for almost 10 years, of companies that actually truly have that, that budget and the size and scope of the company to bring it all in-house, and there's companies that I admire really that have done that, and they don't have a lot of outside influence, and they have more inside vendors. We interviewed Clark Twitty a little while ago on the Ventori feed, and he talked about that. They have very, very much an in-house approach. They don't do a lot of outside, agencies or other services. And I've tried to, pitch them a few times or kind of get in front of people on their team a few times, and that's not their approach. But they're an extremely successful company right up in the Outer Banks, 1,000+ units. They
They
have
also
the
do about $100 million a year in revenue or
yeah.
more. So, that if you have that, then yeah, you can certainly build a team like that.
Absolutely. I think that companies like that are obviously the exception, not the rule by a wide margin, and very few reach that level. But like to your point, when you got that, you can kind of make your own decisions on building your own in-house team. And obviously, your company was phenomenally successful as well down in Florida. You had in a budget of 4 to 6 people. There's a lot of clients who they have 6 people in their whole team, maybe in terms of full-time equivalent. So, right on there. Well, awesome. So a few more kind of notes here. I know we've got about 10-ish minutes left. We may not need all of it if we kind of go through it. So just maybe two kind of pieces to tie in here. We talked about people stack, and then we talked about kind of this growth path, if you will. So people stack was more your terminology, Steve, and I'm not super familiar with what this is. You talked about it conceptually, but educate me a little bit. What does people stack look like?
I coined that phrase as it pertains to your people structure. And if you think about an org chart, when people produce an org chart, they usually only put full-time, part-time individuals on the organizational structure. When we develop a people stack, and we do that with every one of our clients, we list all of the humans that have some part of the business, and that can be full-time, part-time, independent contractor, consultant, virtual assistant, a third-party contractor, an agency. Our company, as the hiring company and the talent optimization company, is actually listed on that structure. And if you think about it, if you went and looked at a P&L, and I've looked at about 1,500 P&Ls in this industry, the biggest cost structure is the people. Well, generally speaking, when people say that, they're talking about their staff, their full-time employees, maybe some part-time employees. They're not generally looking at it from a total perspective. So I look at it, what is the total cost of the people that do the things to execute your business relative to your whole? And it's generally well more than 50% of the cost structure. So I say we should be optimizing our people stack, right? And I use the term stack because it's much like a tech stack where we all talk about, used to be tech stack, by the way, it was like a developer term, and normal business owners didn't talk about tech stack. Today we all do. And you go to a VRMA or a VRNation or one of the conferences and everybody's sitting around talking about their tech stack. I want people to also consider their people stack and really think about what that structure looks like. How can I optimize that? Way bigger cost structure, by the way, than the cost of the technology. We spent all that time talking about our tech stack, and it's like, 5%, 3% of our total cost structure, whereas our people stack is north of 50, generally speaking. So probably we should be focused on that as well as a business.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think that, I mean, this is always an awkward situation for me, Steve, and hopefully no one listening fits in this bucket. And I really struggle with it. But sometimes I go into business and I think the person that maybe has some marketing or marketing adjacent role that we're talking to really shouldn't be there. They don't have the skills, they don't have the talent, they don't have what they need to really make the role effective. And it puts us in a bind sometimes where I'm like, hey, we need to almost get past this person to be effective in what we're doing, email
Mhm.
marketing, SEO, PPC, whatever the case may be. And then we almost have like a roadblock in the way that we're running into. So, it's really challenging, especially if we're not dealing with the owner of the company or the CEO, the founder. We're dealing with someone else, and it's like we have to give them advice based on the fact that I don't think they should be there. Like that's happened to us regularly over the last year or two.
We've run into companies where they said, we worked with XYZ marketing firm, but it just didn't
Mhm.
work out. And I'm looking at Tony, the marketing coordinator, and I'm going, I think I know why,
Yeah.
right? It's because, if you engage with an agency, you've got to have somebody on the team that's giving that agency what they need to be successful, right? And not being a barrier. And sometimes those individuals fear for their jobs and think the agency is going to come in and take over their job. And so they become a roadblock. And so making sure that that's not the case with your team member, if you have somebody on the team that's interacting, and that goes for any type of agency you're working with, a talent acquisition company, right? We have the same thing in our business. So it's just making sure that those individuals know that, hey, we're outsourcing this for a reason. We're not replacing you with this company. We really need to be exceptional at getting them what they need and engaging with them to get the value that we're paying for out of that third party.
You nailed it with that last one, honestly, right? Which is like, I always dislike that. We have clients that are, paying us. It's not like our business is being harmed by these relationships, but I look at it and I go, well, we're not getting all you are paying for, though. We're not squeezing all the juice out of the lemon, if you will, in this scenario, because you're not giving us what we need, to your point, right? Like we're waiting on an email list, we're waiting on final photos from the new listing, that you said you were going to send over to us and we don't have it. And it just like puts a knot in my stomach, to be honest with you, Steve, because I look at that sometimes and go like, yeah, okay, like we're fine with it. Like it's not harming us in any way. But I can't feel like that client is looking at that, the cost that they're paying us and feeling like, oh, I'm getting great value out of it when they're not doing what needs to be done. So yeah, I've had some awkward conversations and awkward emails over over the years, right? With people talking with the owner maybe at some point and going, hey, we're really struggling, to deal with person ABC on your team or person DEF on your team who's not giving us what we need to be successful. And things are slowing down. Here's some proof. Here's all the emails we sent. Here's all things we tried and it's not working. So yeah, I think as the CEO, as the founder, if you're listening in and you're the owner, the vacational company, maybe it's the agency's fault. I will admit we're not perfect. We made plenty of mistakes. If there's a mistake, I've made it, at this point for sure over 10 years. But also it's, you got to look at your own team too and say, have I given them, are we working well together? Are we in the same boat, rowing the same direction? And unfortunately, that's not always the case. So, Steve, anything that we didn't get to? If not, I want to give some final notes here and some pitches on the last two things, or any Q&As that maybe, came in from your perspective that weren't in the agenda that we should have done over the last little bit.
I think we covered the major bullet points of what we intended to do, and I think that the people listening, whether you're listening to recording or live now, really think through this. This is a significant investment of time and money. You've got to get ROI from it. It's important to do. If you're not doing anything to drive, direct bookings, repeat referral bookings, you definitely need to be doing this, but you need to do it really intentionally and very well and have experts that understand it that are going to bring you that ROI, but you also have to know enough about it to get that return.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I agree. It has to be always we always say like we're doing a lot of services for our clients, but it's always a done with you type thing. We're doing it with you. It's not just like you kick it over the fence and then we do our thing and then you have no involvement. And some clients too, do they have the time to dedicate to working with us, to chatting with us, and so on and so forth. So, Steve, you offered folks coming, whether they're watching again the recording, if they're here live, something really cool when we talked about putting this together, which is a hiring credit. How would one redeem this? How would one reach out to your team and redeem this hiring credit for coming in and listening to this webinar today?
yeah, no, if you whether you work with us on a single hire basis or you work with us on a subscription basis, we would just apply that $500 to when you sign up to whatever it is you sign up for. And I will tell you, we're the most efficient, probably recruiting you'll ever find, even outside of the industry. We're the only company of its type that focuses in on the vacation rental industry, and we have a deep understanding of building that people stack with you. So we'd love the opportunity to do that, and we would just apply that credit to it. So to make it even more efficient.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm assuming they can just go to bettertalent.com, reach out to someone on your team, and the appropriate pieces will get put together. If they need to take a screenshot of this and send it along, you'll make sure that gets applied when they're talking into the team there. That's awesome.
Yeah.
My email got a little on two lines there. Sorry about that. I made it really big. But anyways, if you were in the US, I'd be happy to send you a physical copy of Mastering Vacational Marketing. I can actually put it in the mail here from my house, send it off to wherever you are, as long as you're within the States. If you're outside of the US, at least the place that I can mail to easily from my house, I'm happy to send you a PDF copy. So just email me webinar freebie in the subject line, and then email Conrad at buildupbookings.com. And I'm happy to send over, again, a physical copy. If you're in the US, obviously I need your mailing address. You'll need to send that over to me. If you're based internationally or somewhere where you just don't want to get the physical copy, a PDF, I'd be happy to send that to you. Within the book, we talk at length about kind of what marketing tactics to do, what makes sense. And I think that could be a valuable resource for people. If you want to work with us here at Build Up Bookings, of course, just go to buildupbookings.com, click the book a free call option right there on the screen. Very easy to find. Book a call with someone on our team. We'd be happy to see if we can potentially help you on the marketing side. So, Steve, thank you. This was great. It was good to kind of chat with someone that has your breadth and depth of experience. It was phenomenal. I thank you for your time. If there's nothing else, we can let people go a few minutes early and they can enjoy the rest of their day, and I'm sure get to a lot of fun things they have to deal with for the rest of the season as we get into the summer here.
Absolutely. Thank you for attending, everybody. And Conrad, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
No, it was my pleasure, Steve. You made this easy. Your wealth of knowledge, so it's easy for me to just ask a few questions, talk about a few ideas, and I think we filled the time nicely. So thanks everyone for tuning in. We appreciate it. We'll catch you on the next one. And Steve, thank you. Have an awesome rest of your day. Thank you.
You too. Take care.
Success.